Well, good morning. My name is Kimawan Piesu Esqueyu. It means reigning Thunderbird woman in the Cree language. I'm a member of the Chippewa Cree tribe of Rocky Boy, Montana. My English name is Summer Day Rosette. I've been with DHS for about 9 years, going on 10 actually. I'm getting there, almost 10 years. And I am the ICWA training coordinator, and we want to welcome everybody to the SSIS Mentor Coffee Talk for SSIS, ICWA, and MIFPA data entry. I work with the American Indian Wellbeing Unit, formerly known as the ICWA unit. I also partner, so I'm kind of in a unique role at the moment as an ICWA training coordinator. I've been in this official capacity as the ICWA training coordinator since August, but worked in a work out of class with the same job description for a year prior. But the position itself is a collaboration between the Minnesota Child Welfare Training Academy, the American Indian Wellbeing Unit, and SSIS Business Operations Unit. So before I go into housekeeping, I'd like to turn it over to the rest of our panelists that we have here today for introductions. So I'm just gonna, instead of popcorning it, I'm just gonna pass it and then we'll pass it to the next person. So the person, Molly, is the next one that I have in my screen.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Molly Kaler. I work in the SSIS Business Operations as one of the fiscal subject matter experts.
I'll take it, Molly.
There you go.
You didn't assign me, but I'm going to take it. I'm Marcia Riss. I am one of the SSIS Business Operations subject matter experts as well, and I'm on the worker side. And I'll throw that over to Erica.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Erica Jepson, and I am the child welfare subject matter expert along with Marcia. And I will throw it over to Cynthia.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. My name is Cynthia Shaipolsky, and I am the SSIS Business Operations Supervisor. And I'm really happy to be here today for this fantastic topic. And I want to do a brief introduction. We have a new, not a new team member, but we have are going to be having a new fiscal subject matter expert joining our team we've had a vacancy for about 6 months. And we're really happy to have Samantha Breitenbach, who has been on our help desk for the past couple years and brings a lot of experience from various roles in counties prior to coming to the state. And she's going to be transitioning into this fiscal SME role next Wednesday on October 26th. And so we're really thankful for her to be able to move into this new position and bring all of her experience and expertise and knowledge about really questions that are coming in and issues that are current at the agencies with her to this new role. So good morning, Sam.
Good morning. Thank you, Cynthia. I came from Carver County and McLeod County previous to this, mostly in accounting, and I've been on the help desk in Tier 1 for the past year and a half. So I'm glad to be joining Molly as a fiscal SME.
All right. Is there anybody left in the panelists that needs to do an intro?
No, but I would like to just do a real quick mention of a couple things. And we'll probably also do this at the end, so I want to catch everybody on both sides. First, I know Heidi had sent out some information and, about piloting for our 22.4 release. We are still looking for some agencies to pilot, and we'd encourage you to either contact me directly. Everybody should have my email, or also send in any interest you might have to the help desk. We have a lot of really exciting things that are going to be in this next release and are really looking forward for 1 or 2 more agencies to join the other piloting agency. The things that will be in there will be focused a lot on fiscal, a lot of family first claiming. We also have a lot of significant changes that are related to our AFCARS 2 requirements. And then a few other things in there related to changes for business organizations. and a few things for adult protection service area as well. Also some items related to passwords and some ease of use with kind of logging in and access. So we're really excited for these changes. And if you guys have any interest or have questions about what it would really entail, contact me, contact the help desk. We'd appreciate any consideration. And we also just wanted to mention, to put on your calendars, we have our 22.4 release coffee talk will be on Tuesday, November 28th at 9. So more information and sign up about that will be coming up shortly. That is what I have today. Thank you, everyone.
I'll just quickly introduce myself as well. I'm Alex Mentis, and I'm the SSIS manager over SSIS business operations and SSIS training. And thank you everybody for being here. And I'll just also add that if you do choose to be a pilot agency, we are hoping to start doing some site visits. So please be in touch. We would love to come visit you. Thanks. All right, take it away, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. So what I'm going to do really quick before we get into the framework and flow and share the topics that we're going to go over today, I just want to share a couple of things about the questions and using chat. As I'm going through the presentation, oh, let me back up for 1 second. There is another staff member from the American Indian Wellbeing Unit. And I'm sure those of you that are just hearing that title for the very first time are wondering, what is the American Indian Wellbeing Unit? Well, the ICWA unit at DHS has changed their name. We have changed our name, excuse me, to the American Indian Wellbeing Unit, solely because we work with all areas that cover, the American or child welfare with American Indian families. And so we don't just work with ICWA. So we wanted it to be more inclusive, our title to be more inclusive of the work that we're actually doing, or all inclusive of the work that we're doing. So again, the ICWA unit has changed their name to the American Indian Wellbeing Unit. The other staff member, her name is Cindy Miller. She will be joining us, probably here in the next few minutes. So if she joins before I move on to the next slide, then I'll have her go ahead and introduce herself. But if not, then I'll just give you some information about her. Cindy Miller, she's a ICWA compliance consultant with the American Indian Wellbeing Unit, and she's been with DHS for a few years now. And she's also an attorney. So another thing that I wanted to mention is that we would like everybody to utilize the Q&A feature for any questions that you have as we're going through the training today. The chat feature, if you put a question in chat, we don't have the ability to actually create a digest of those questions so that we can, send those out, following the training, or just, at least have those for future FAQs. But if you can utilize, we want everybody to utilize the Q&A feature. If there's a question that you have as I'm going through some information today, please use that Q&A feature. You can use the chat feature if you're having any type of audio issues, connection issues. If you're, wanting a link to a specific document that I'm sharing, we do have a resource page at the end of the PowerPoint. And those of you that had, everybody should have received the PowerPoint prior to today's training. It's also been posted in chat. So there are actual live links to a lot of the resources that I'll be sharing today. Is there anything that I'm missing from those that are in the panel? Oh, the panel will monitor chat, and then we will save all questions to the end after we get done with the presentation, which shouldn't take too long, maybe 15-20 minutes, and then we'll move right into questions. So please ask away. You know, there are no silly questions. It's important that you feel like you have the support that you need, and that you're have an opportunity to ask those questions. If you decide to send a question anonymously and it's something that needs to be followed up on, please make sure that you're, number one, remembering that question, but once it's asked, and if we have to follow up, you can send a private message to one of the panelists and just say, hey, I'm the one that sent the question that needs follow-up. Here's how you can give back to me. Right, I think that's everything before we get going. So today, we're gonna go through and talk about inquiry. And one of the things that should accompany inquiry in SSIS is to always make sure you have that activity and or I say case note, but we'll talk about why I'm using the term case note versus contact or activity. We're going to go into the difference between the ICWA notice, which is a federal notice, and the MIFPA notice, which is state, because we get a lot of questions that ask if, you know, the MIFPA notice, people are still, there's still some confusion about when the MIFPA notice goes out and the ICWA notice goes out. So we're going to talk about that. And then when we get into the active efforts, we're going to talk about some best practices, some do's and don'ts, and you know, some of the statements that need to be made when using active efforts in order for active efforts to be met, in order for them to be deemed as a qualified, you know, active effort statement. So we're going to get into that. And what I would like to do once we get into the active effort section, I'm going to ask for some participation. And this actually, for this section, will go into the chat. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask for folks to give me an example of what an active effort would be. So I'll touch on that once we get in there. We're going to go over, just provide some brief information about the SSIS help text. I believe that'll be updated. It says it's going to be updated in early 2023 with a release that will be coming out, but the help text itself is already updated. It's just not in SSIS just yet. So we're talking about, at the moment, putting out the document that shows what that help text states for SSI, for ICWA MIFPA. And then we'll go through the MinChoice assessment because we've received some questions about the SSIS entry. And last but not least is the enhancement request update, and we'll provide some information about where the status of those enhancement requests. So the first slide we're going to go over is inquiry. I want to share a little bit about the intent of inquiry. So the intent of inquiry is to ask everyone regardless of their appearance. By asking everyone, it gives that immediate identification of an ICWA case, and you can start to implement the ICWA MIFPA provisions. In the American Indian Wellbeing Unit, it's really important to us that we stress that ICWA is not race-based, rather it's a political status, because we get a lot of questions about why people have to inquire, and do I have to inquire if I did 6 months ago, things like that. So when we go into, when you're inquiring about the ICWA provision inquiry, you want to do it as early as possible. So we like to say best practice is to inquire at intake. We also know that that's not always possible, but it should begin at intake. The other thing that we're going to point out is that because the help text has been, will be updated in early 2023, but the document itself will go out within, I believe it's only going to take a couple days to post. I'll have Marcia maybe or Erica share more information once we get into that question later on. And then the other thing that I like to point out about inquiry is it's something that can continue throughout the life of the case. And what I mean by that is, so if it begins at intake, and let's say the family says, no, I don't know any, or whoever the reporter is says, no, there's no history of American Indian heritage or tribal lineage. And then you go to your first meeting with the family and it's in person and you're seeing, pictures on the wall that are, or drums on the wall or feathers, something that just indicated to you that there's potentially, Indian heritage. And I know that, it's just one of the things that people say that triggered that thought. You can ask again. And a lot of times people are finding that the reporter during intake didn't know if there was any tribal heritage or tribal lineage. So workers are asking when they do that initial contact, and they're then finding that there is American Indian or Alaskan Native heritage or tribal lineage. So, and then when you meet additional people, in the family, let's say you're working to, let's say that you're meeting additional members of the family because you're talking with the extended family, as you know, you do have to inquire with extended family. And they say, yes, my grandfather was potentially a member of this specific federally recognized tribe. So we just ask that it's something that you continue to do throughout the life of the case. It does begin at intake or at the earliest possible time. All right. All right, so what you're seeing here is the actual ICWA inquiry tab that's found in the ICWA eligibility determination in SSIS. So the reason why I brought out all of the what we'll find in the drop downs is so that I can kind of explain a little bit about the responses that are there and how to document when you have new information that you're receiving. So for instance, as you know, the provision requires that you speak with the mother, whether that's the biological or adoptive, the father, Indian custodian, if there is one, the child's extended family, the child, and whether or not the child is eligible whether or not the child is a member or eligible for membership in an Indian child. And the last question is about whether the child's parents, or the child's Indian custodian reside on a reservation or Alaskan Native village. So the importance of putting this information out there is to share that what you're not seeing here is an option to select a date. So what we're asking folks to do is to make sure that they include a date. And to do that, in the past, we had asked folks to complete a case note or have an accompanying case note. But in the next screen, which will go to Marcia, but we're making sure that people are understanding there's no duplication here. And it's actually, instead of a case note, it's actually a contact or activity. And how you document that, I'll show on the next screen. So, but some of the things that I want to point out about the ICWA inquiry tab is if you have to select no, for instance, inquired with the child's biological or adoptive mother, and if select no in that drop down, in your contact or activity, you need to provide information about why you did not inquire with the mother. And so on and so forth for the father. If there's not an Indian custodian, there's an option to select that the child does not have one. But anytime you answer no, we're looking for more detailed about why you answered no. Why wasn't the mother, why didn't we inquire with the mother? And then the next one is about the child. If the child is too young, we know that, if the child's too young and you selected no for inquiry, you would just put too young, in the contact or activity. So I'm going to move on and show you that example here. All right, so this is an example of what you'll see or what we're looking for. And it obviously, this is just one example. However you document it, as long as it covers and provides all the information we're looking for, then, we're just want to make sure that we see that the purpose says ICWA inquiry. This is your activity. And in the notes, mom states yes, and what the mother stated yes to. Her mother and is enrolled member of the Mille Lacs band. as an example. Father states no known Indian heritage in maternal or paternal sides of his family. Indian custodian states no known Indian heritage in the family. And then when you inquired with the extended family, they all said no, they weren't aware of any American Indian or Alaskan Native tribal lineage. And then for the child answering no to inquiry question, Indian child is an infant and too young. So just making sure that you're providing detailed information like that when responding to adding in that client contact portion. So I'm going to turn it over to Marcia so she can provide some information about the use of the contact and or activity versus how we had requested folks use case notes in the past. Marcia?
Yeah, thanks, Summer Day. So you've inquired about ICWA and you've entered your ICWA inquiry screen that somebody just showed. That's great, right? But don't forget that you still need to enter an activity note, which will end up as a contact or attempted contact with the details of your inquiry. So previous trainings, like somebody had said, and some of the job aids, I believe, that are still out there, which we are working on getting fixed, but they may indicate, I think they use the word case notes, and a lot of people aren't aware that there's a difference in SSIS when we talk about case notes versus activity and contact as well. So case notes and activities are not synonymous in SSIS, which can be kind of confusing. I think we all, when we see a time record or activity and contact, we still in our minds are thinking, this is my case note. So it can get confusing really fast, but they're not the same thing. So when you're doing a ICWA inquiry, you're doing some type of either an attempted contact or a contact, right? So you really should have activity entered, and the activity becomes a contact once you fill out. So if you look at that slide, on that bottom portion is the contact portion. So once that's filled out, when this gets saved into SSIS, it's going to show up under the contact folder of the chronology. So when we say activity and contact, that's why we're using both of those terms together, because depending on what's filled out, it may become a contact or it may remain an activity. So you want to make sure that that information is entered. And when you're doing so, and you'll notice on the slide there that Summer Day has, she's showing the purpose line, which is, it's the very first field under the contact section. However, FYI, you can use that purpose line even when this isn't a contact, like if it's a attempted contact, or for any other time, you can use that purpose line and it'll show up. So for those agencies who use like the user activity log, it'll show up as a column that's an option in your grid. You can really quickly be able to pull in anything that's ICWA. You can see that column, you can see that information that you wrote in the purpose line. So it's really helpful. So we do recommend that you use that purpose line and you write ICWA inquiry if this is my note pertaining to inquiry. And if inquiry is done over multiple days, multiple notes might be entered, put it on each one of those. If you're doing other things as well, so let's say you're doing, maybe this is my observation as well as maybe also adult interview observation, and I also happen to do ICWA inquiry at the same time, I can still write whatever I usually would write under purpose line, but also write ICWA inquiry in there. So it doesn't have to be, its own separate note from everything else. You can certainly do it with other items as well. But putting that ICWA inquiry makes it really easy to find where is that note pertaining to ICWA inquiry. So like Summer Day said, when you're looking at that ICWA inquiry tab, it doesn't have all the information. What it has is, who did you ask, right? It doesn't actually give you what was the answer that they gave, and some of those details that she wants in the note itself. So like that example shows. So make sure that you have a corresponding note in there. What else did I want to say on this? So when documenting inquiry, be sure to indicate that the activity note, who was inquired with, what the response was, right? Don't just say ICWA inquiry. I've seen that before, and I'm sure the Wellbeing Unit has also seen those things, those really vague answers. Make sure that you're putting enough detail that somebody else other than yourself knows what the answers were, knows who you asked, knows all those kind of details, right? That's really helpful down the road. So I've gotten plenty of questions, I know, at the help desk sends over to us where people are asking, well, now we have some different information, maybe it's 2 years down the road, some different information, But the system is showing from a previous case that there was, American Indian heritage, but now they're telling me no. Well, it really helps if they can go back and find that note with that detail to figure out, well, who wrote that there was American Indian heritage and why? Like, who did they get that information from? So maybe you can follow up with them. So those types of things, you need those details in there. So not just for, audit purposes or whatever, but really just for your own being able to work that case down the road as well. So when there's new work groups that come in. I mentioned using the purpose line, writing ICWA inquiry in there if this is my inquiry work. I think that's it. Anything else that you want to add there?
Can you talk about the agencies that are 100% time recording?
Yeah, so on this one, regardless of your 100% time recording, right? If you have a attempted or a contact, you really should be putting that in as an activity so that it shows up as your attempted contact or your contact. If you're 100% time recording, so like we're going to talk about as we go through, like when we're talking about efforts and other things that maybe I'm doing something that wouldn't be considered a contact or an activity. Well, 100% time recording agencies are still going to put those things under activity. Other agencies who are not 100% time recording and they're not doing a contact, they may be putting their details of various like active efforts kinds of notes. They may be putting those under case notes. And that's okay as well. I still use, and I'm trying to think, I'm trying to picture that screen, that the case note, I think it's like a subject line rather than a purpose line. It may say something different, but essentially it's the same thing. So you want to make sure that you're still indicating, this is ICWA active efforts, it's ICWA inquiry, whatever it is that's related to ICWA, you want to still use that line so that we can find those notes really easily, especially when there's, maybe years worth of notes sometimes. We want to be able to go back and find those and find the details without having to dig through every single note and still sometimes missing it. So, yeah.
All right. That's everything I had to add about this. If you have any questions, please put your questions in the Q&A, just a friendly reminder. We will go through Q&A after the presentation. So we're going to move on to the next slide and talk about the MIFPA notice. As I mentioned as we were going through the framework and flow, we want to make sure people understand the difference between the MIFPA notice and the ICWA notice, and that there are specific timelines for a MIFPA notice. So a MIFPA notice, the Minnesota Indian Family Preservation Act notice requirements are, and another thing really quick is the screenshots that you're seeing at the top of the screen here is a screen grab from the actual ICWA MIFPA desk aid. And we do have a link to that at the bottom of the PowerPoint in our resources page. The ICWA MIFPA desk aid is a quick snapshot of what you would do once you get a screened in FA, family assessment, or FI, family investigation case. So what you want to do first, within first 24 hours of that screened in investigation, family FA or FI, you should provide notice to any known tribe by phone call within the first 24 hours. Within the first 24 hours, you make that phone call to the known tribe, and then you follow up by sending the MIFPA notice by either email and or fax. You can email from SSIS. There is an option when you go to the print option of the actual document in SSIS. And for those that don't have access to SSIS, you can find the eDocs form. I will go over the eDocs form here in a couple slides. But for those cases where your agency is providing for those child welfare cases, you do have 7 days to provide the MIFPA notice to any known tribes, first by phone, and then you follow that up with an email and or fax. And that's if these children if the agency is providing services and the children are accepting and the family is accepted and you're providing services or receiving services. So as you can see, there are two parts to the MIFPA notice. Each are different. The first is that 24-hour immediate notice for those screened in FA or FIs. And then the second is the 7-day notice for the child welfare cases. So, So the reason the MIFPA notice was created, well, the MIFPA notice was developed by the tribes. So tribes had the option to be made aware of a case and become involved with the case at the earliest possible time. We do receive several questions in the American Indian Wellbeing Unit related to our MIFPA notice. So I wanted to just make sure that we shared the differences between the requirements for the MIFPA notice, depending on what was screened in or what the case is with the agency, and what it looks like online through eDocs and how it looks in SSIS. It's virtually the same thing, but sometimes people that, like I said, don't have access to SSIS, or they're traveling to a rural area and they don't have access to, quality internet. So a lot of times people will print the eDocs form and they'll print the eDocs form and they'll complete that MIFPA notice and enter things in by hand. And then you can scan that document as an attachment under chronology into SSIS. If you do that, you still do need to complete the MIFPA notice section under the ICWA eligibility determination screens or tabs, excuse me. So this is just an example of what it looks like in SSIS. It's important that to use SSIS to document in chronology and you want to provide all of the details, this is what it looks like in SSIS once you enter the information and you hit the letter E, that edit option, so you can see the full document itself. Completing this one and selecting the appropriate sections, you need to indicate, or excuse me, first enter the children's name, then indicate the type of notice that you're submitting. This one I selected was the immediate CP notice, which needs to be done within the first 24 hours, first by a phone call, and then followed by email and or fax. And then you have the 7-day voluntary services notice or voluntary placement notice. And then the continued voluntary placement review, that's also a 7-day notice requirement. The other thing that this section will ask is the date that the actual screened in FA, FI, or child welfare services or the foster care placement began. And then at the very bottom, I understand, that it can be really hard to actually see the sections that you're required to fill out. So the first thing you're going to see at the bottom is that phone call that you made within either the first 24 hours or the first seven days, depending on the actual case. So you'll put the date, who the caller was that contacted the tribal child welfare, and you'd put the staff name of who you spoke with. And the next thing is the follow-up email and or fax. So it's basically the same information that you want to enter. So this is just a screen grab of what it looks like in SSIS with the information that needs to be entered. A lot of the questions that we get sometimes are referring to, oh, let me back up actually. When you do call the tribe, and provide information, you want to make sure that you document that phone call, details, include all the details of who you spoke with. Did you leave a message? Is this your first time calling, second time calling? Just try to put as much information as you can when you're documenting your contacts with the tribe. Because if it's not documented, it didn't happen, and you want to make sure that you're sharing your work and the contacts that you've made. So this is the second page of the MIFPA notice. The first portion is who was contacted at the tribal agency. The middle portion I don't have highlighted or isolated here, just because it shows who the worker is here. This is the caseworker and the county agency information. And then the last thing you see here are attachments. So on the second page, it talks about, did you include the genogram? Because remember, anytime you send that MIFPA notice and the ICWA notice, you want to make sure include the ICWA MIFPA genogram. And again, that is a document you can find in SSIS and in eDocs. And it's, although not required, it is best practice to provide some of the following documents. So one of them is a copy of the screening or the screen child protection report, any of those voluntary placement agreements, depending on the case that you're working on. And if there's a social service application, and whatever you think is a pertinent information that a Indian Child's Tribe should know or might need. Remember, it's important to know that the tribe does not need to complete a release of information, because think of the tribal child welfare agency as privy to the same information that the county agency is privy to. And they need as much information as you have in order for them to make a determination, you know, on whether or not this child is eligible for membership, or has any documented family or lineage that's tied to that specific tribe. But it's just important to know that there's not a required release of information to you know, to speak with the tribal child welfare agency. Is there anything anybody else on the panel would like to add about MIFPA notice? I am going to move on to the eDocs form here. All right, so as I mentioned, I wanted to provide just a quick snapshot of what the eDocs form looks like on the DHS website. So for those that have access to the PowerPoint, if you don't, I have provided the actual document number. You'll see that it says DHS-5227A-ENG. ENG is just letting you know that it's in English, and there's, I believe there, I don't know if there's additional options. I think you can only find this in English, but don't quote me. If someone knows the answer to that before I look for it, then please chime in. So the MIFPA notice is what we want people to know is the state notice. Okay, it's the Minnesota Indian Family Preservation Act. It's a state requirement. The ICWA notice is that federal ICWA requirement. So the eDocs has a printable version that you can find on the DHS website through eDocs, or you can complete the form actually online and then print what you've completed. And then for those that do not have access to SSIS, that's why these are available through eDocs. Or for those, you know, we've actually heard other agencies state that they print copies off. So when they go to the rural areas where, like I mentioned earlier, the internet is spotty, then they have the ability to complete the actual form by hand and then scan it into SSIS and chronology under attachments. But keep in mind, as I mentioned, if you do complete the form by hand and then scan it in, you still want to make sure that you're completing the ICWA tab under the the MIFPA notice tab under ICWA eligibility. All right. So now I'm going to move on to the ICWA notice. The ICWA notice can be found under the, so if you look at the top, this is basically just the path in SSIS. So under ICWA, you have your ICWA eligibility, and the second tab or second folder is the child custody proceeding notification. So that's what you're seeing here. The ICWA notice in SSIS will show the date that you created the notice, and you have to select the continuous placement that it's referring to. The ICWA notice is the federal notice, the federal ICWA notice requirement. When you're submitting the ICWA notice, it has to be sent by certified or registered mail to the parent or parents, the Indian custodians or custodian, the Indian child's potential tribe or tribe, and then you have to submit a copy of what you submitted to those individuals, not 3 different copies or 4 different copies. You just send 1 copy of what you submitted to the tribe, the parent, or the Indian custodian to the BIA. Just a copy has to go to the BIA. Now, if you're requesting information from the BIA, because you're trying to locate the address or locate a parent. The second page of the paper ICWA notice, there's a request option. It's towards the middle of the page. And with that request option, it allows you to check that box after you've completed as much information as possible on the first page. And you go to the second, you check the box that says you're requesting information. And then you submit that by certified or registered mail to the BIA if you're needing to request information about a specific parent or any potential documented lineage or an address, sorry, if there's a parent or an address that's needed, or just any information, if you're looking for support from the BIA. It does need to be submitted by certified or registered mail with return receipt. And the other thing that we mentioned is that the BIA does have 14 business days to respond, and they can also request an extension for another up to 21 days, I believe, to respond to your request. So the other thing that it's important for people to know, let's say you're sending your ICWA notice to the parents of your you have to send a separate notice to each parent, even if they live at the same address. So one has to go to mom, one has to go to dad, they both have to sign it. The ICWA notice must be returned or received, excuse me, it must be received within 10 days prior to the admit deny. So it's important to make sure that those are scheduled with enough time for the individuals who are required to receive this notice, get it before with at least 10 days prior to that admit deny. So in SSIS, it's going to ask you those specific questions. Did you send it to the parent and any custodian? Was it sent by a registered or certified mail? And if so, what date did you send it? When you got the green card back from the post office, that return receipt back, what date did you receive that return receipt? So, or excuse me, there's a date on the return receipt that identifies when the family or whoever it was, the parent, the any custodian or the tribe, when they signed for it. That date would go here under notice received date. And then was it within 10 days prior to the admit deny? Did you submit a copy of what you sent to the parent, any custodian or the tribe to the BIA? And if so, what was the date that you sent copies of that information to the BIA? If there are multiple tribes, you have to send it the ICWA notice and the MIFPA notice to the multiple tribes. And again, this is what you can find on the DHS website through eDocs. This is a printable form, just like the MIFPA, or you can go online and fill it out. Remember, ICWA notice is the federal requirement. So if there's a placement, ICWA notice is that federal requirement. And the MIFPA notice is the state, part of state statute, tribal state agreement. Is there anything you'd like to add about this part, Cindy, or anybody on the panel about the ICWA notice? I think I covered everything. But in the PowerPoint, I've also included the link, a live link to the eDocs form, as well as the document number. If for those that are interested in a paper copy or those without access to SSIS.
Summer Day, I
Yes.
guess I would just add one thing.
Yes.
For our purposes, when we're doing reviews, it's really helpful when you get the green card back into the agency that it's date stamped the day that it gets back, because sometimes these green cards that come back don't have a date on them as to when the person signed it. We do have the ability to go back to the post office and find out with using a tracking number on the receipt. So you can confirm when it was actually served on that person. It's also helpful for the agency to date stamp it when they get it in. Just a best practice.
Perfect. Thank you, Cindy. All right. We're almost to the end of the presentation, and then we'll get into our questions here. Now, this is where I wanted to potentially get some interaction. What I want to see is if people can share what their example of an active effort is versus a reasonable effort. So we get a lot of questions about active efforts and what the initial intent of active efforts were. So we wanted to share with you how to document. Well, we wanted to just share with you examples of best practices when documenting active efforts. So as you know, active efforts can be found under the ICWA folder below the eligibility and or determination. You have your active effort status, and then you have your ICWA active efforts and the ICWA active efforts placement. I was in a training yesterday, and the one thing that I forgot to mention, because I had a question about active efforts and for the family, I believe it was for family assessments. And the question had to do with, do I complete the active effort screen for a screened in FA? The answer is yes, but you would you would complete active efforts if it's for active efforts are required for when the agency is providing services for 30 days or more. So under 30 days, and in a, let's say an FA case or a child welfare case, the SSIS won't trigger the requirement for active efforts, but if it's over 30 days, it will. Is there anybody that wants to provide any more information about that, or if I stated that correctly? Actually, I have it written down, so yes, I did state it correctly, but is there anything anybody else wanted to add about that? No pressure. I think I covered it. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to point out is the first question that you see in SSIS is whether or not did you engage and consult with the designated representative and so on. What you're looking at for all of the questions that are in ICWA active efforts in SSIS, that it's the same question that the compliance consultants look at when they're completing their compliance reviews. It's also the same statement. It just depends on who the reader is of that statement. That it's also listed in the ICWA MIFPA checklist. We did provide a link to the ICWA MIFPA checklist in the resource portion of our training today. So you'll have a link that you can go to check out that checklist, but the question is there to kind of help you provide the additional detail that is required for an active effort. So I provided some examples, and then I'll go into some best practices for active efforts documentation and some of the do's and don'ts that we're seeing through reviews and through the questions that we're receiving. So here's an example of an active effort. And just to point out as well, the MIFPA notice, sending the MIFPA notice, contacting the tribe about the MIFPA notice and doing that follow-up, that's active efforts. That's considered active efforts as well. So, so what you want to do first is put the date that you're providing the description or completing the agency efforts. And so I have here listed, this is just a example, contact a tribal social worker to coordinate a meeting with all parties or with the family and maybe guardian ad litem if they're available to create out-of-home placement plan with myself and the family. Tribal social worker states availability on such and such date at this time, which is the same date and time that the family is available to meet. I know that's not always that simple, but I'm just providing an example. The tribal social worker states having a meeting room available at their tribal child welfare office and the tribal worker provided address. I provided the tribal social worker with my cell phone in case plans change. Oops. Or you can state forwarding information to family, confirmation, you know, just adding in that the additional detail versus making the blanket statement of contacted tribal social worker. So that kind of brings me to the next slide, which is some of our do's and don'ts, or what we call best practice when it comes to active efforts. So one of the things that we're seeing is we see where individual cases will show the same, you know, like I said, statement, just like a blanket statement, provided case management, set up case plan, contacted the tribe, spoke with a social worker or attempted to call the tribal social worker. And then we'll see that these specific statements or blanket statements are copied and pasted from quarter 1 to quarter 2 or quarter 2 to quarter 3 and so on and so forth. So those type of statements do not meet the active effort requirement. So when we talk about requiring that detailed description of the agency's actions, which is what it lists in the help text, which is what it lists on the ICWA MIFPA checklist, in the provision, active efforts provision, you know, you want to make sure that you're including the date and a detailed description of the agency's actions to support the Indian child and their family. So if you did contact the tribe, put the date, you contacted the tribal social worker, you shared information about a home visit and invited tribal social worker to attend. These are all just examples. Again, tribal social worker states this, you know, or called tribal worker to schedule out-of-home placement plan meeting to develop or review or to sign off on the out-of-home placement plan, because the tribal social worker and the tribe should be involved or invited to be involved in that process and sign off on it as well. Or I emailed or mailed a copy of out-of-home placement plan to tribal social worker and the guardian ad litem. You know, you just want to make sure that you're listing that detailed information about your agency's actions, because if it's not detailed and you provided all of those great services and that gold standard of care, and it's not detailed, then it didn't happen, you know. And so we want to make sure that you're able to document the work, the great work that you're doing. All right, so I'm going to pass it over to Marcia. She's going to go into the ICWA calculation, because we've received some questions about the ICWA calculation and whether or not what triggers the fiscal ICWA calculation. So Marcia.
Yeah, thanks, Summer Day. So remember, the new, and I say new, but I still think of it as new as of 2019, right? The ICWA fields in SSIS. So which include that ICWA eligibility screens and the calculated status. They're not yet linked to the fiscal claiming. So I know that that's the intent, is my understanding still, but currently the fiscal claiming still relies on that yes, no question that you see there where it says qualifies under ICWA field. And that's found on the person screen, or if you're in a work group on the participant screen when you click on the person. So don't forget to update that person node, that yes, no qualifies under ICWA question, to match the most recent calculated ICWA determination from ICWA status tab in the eligibility. So if the determination changes at any point, so you have a new eligibility, right? You know, years go by, you're doing, you know, another eligibility at some point, and maybe you have new information or the status changes. If the determination changes at any point, that automated calculation on the eligibility on the status screen. So if that changes, you still need to go back to that qualifies under ICWA question and update that as well. So you want to make sure that that's accurate, because that's actually the question at this point that fiscal is still tied to. So make sure that you're not forgetting to do that. I think that happens quite often. Can you go to the next slide, Summer? I think the next one's mine as well. Thank you. All right. So, and on that, so also of note, the help desk gets quite a few emails still, and quite a few. We get some, right? We still get some emails and things where people are asking what's needed when the ICWA field on that kinship and adoption eligibility won't autofill as it usually does. So if that ICWA field that eligibility doesn't autofill when you're doing the kinship or adoptions eligibility screen, the setup piece of that, if that doesn't autofill, what it's looking for is back on the continuous placement. So you see that here on that continuous placement, it's looking for that information. So sometimes, we create the continuous placement. At that point, maybe the ICWA stuff isn't done yet, so there's nothing to choose here yet. So you have to make sure that you're going back and entering on the continuous placement that ICWA calculation. So that's going to come again. This calculation that you're seeing here on the screen where it says ICWA, the eligibility determination, that's coming from the ICWA folder, that eligibility folder. So once that's done, you have to make sure that that gets updated on the screen so that it pulls in to your kinship or adoption eligibility. Did I say that right, Erica? I know you're a little bit more familiar with those screens.
Yep, that was correct.
Awesome. Yep. All right.
All right. So we're going to go into, Marcia, you can say, we're going to go into the ICWA and MIFPA apply and when they apply and when it does not apply, because we get a lot of questions about when they should be sending out a notice, whether that's a MIFPA notice or an ICWA notice, and what services require the ICWA MIFPA provisions. So we just have a list here for those where ICWA and MIFPA apply. And then where it talks about MIFPA does not apply, we have PCA and MinChoice services. So I'm going to let Marcia kind of share a little more information about the ICWA tabs that are not required in some of those adult service program types. And she'll explain why the term adult services is used when we're talking about children.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so one more thing I'll point out just on this screen. This is a really great screen. I love this list. I know I used to use it a lot when I was working as a SSIS coordinator back at my agency, because it's really helpful as a reminder. A lot of agencies, I think, have adult services and children and family services. They have it separated where like CD, so chemical dependency, or DD even, oftentimes is like in there if they have different like sections or units or divisions, they have them separated so those things fall under adult services. But for ICWA MIFPA purposes, the CD, if you have a child under 18, then that ICWA MIFPA still applies. And same with the DD work, so the developmental disabilities piece, that applies for DD case management, right? Not waiver, but case management. That's right, Summer Day? I think I reviewed it right before. So keep that in mind. And then on the other side of the screen, you see on the right side where it says MIFPA does not apply for like PCA assessments, MinChoice, and actually it's not services, it's MinChoice assessment. And that's the key, right? It's an assessment. So the SSIS ICWA tabs are not required if you use the adult service program type. So PCA and MinChoice service work groups may use the adult service program type, even though you're doing it for a child. So I think a lot of agencies have gotten in that habit already of using adult service program type to create those work groups for a child that's maybe getting a MinChoice assessment to avoid, because the system looks at CW, child welfare, they look at those work group types and they automatically says, oh, we know that for child welfare services, that ICWA, the requirements apply. And so it would automatically put those against that work group and the worker would have to do those things. But technically, or I should really policy-wise, it doesn't apply for those PCA and MinChoice assessments. So if you create them in adult services, the program type, adult service work group, assessment work group, you will not have to do those ICWA things. So keep that in mind when you're creating those. FYI, because I don't mention it on the next screen, I think when we go into the enhancement stuff, there is an enhancement out there, which I know is up there on the list for a lot of agencies, looking for MinChoice PCA to have its own program type. So that can kind of avoid some of tracking those kinds of things. So I'm hopeful that at some point we'll be able to do that once there's time and resources to do that on our side. but that is out there, and I think that that would be a great idea just to separate this out. Anything else you want to add there, Summer Day or Erica? Anyone else?
Cindy, is there anything? I don't have anything more to add.
I don't have anything.
Okay,
Thanks.
all right, let's move on to the enhancement requests. And then we'll turn that over to Erica.
No, that's me again. Sorry.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Okay, so enhancement request update. So enhancements completed. I think it's easy to forget that once we complete something, it's like, oh, we never do anything. I definitely know the feeling. I've been on the county side of things and the tribal side. When we're looking at what's been done and what hasn't, it's easy to forget things that have been done. So adding additional tribes, that happens all the time. Actually, I think there's an enhancement out there right now for some additional tribes. So make sure if you're finding, hey, there's a new federally recognized tribe or tribe that isn't showing up on the list that you want to have added in there, send that in. That's an enhancement request that we can put in and get those so that they're going to be listed correctly. I think, like I said, I think that there's 2 right now that we're working on. Also pending tribal determination. So I think that was, gosh, I think that was maybe the beginning of this year, maybe it was last year even. Pending tribal determination option was added. That was a big one, I thought. Option was added to the eligibility determination tab so that eligibilities can be finalized even if no response from the tribe by the time that the services are ended, you're ready to close everything out, and workers were finding, hey, we can't actually close this out. We can't finalize it because we never got a response, which is going to happen at times. You can change that to pending tribal determination. You can still finalize everything. If you get at some point later down the road, the tribe responds, you can go ahead and change the finalization back to draft. That's still available. And then you would be able to update that information and refinalize it. So just FYI, those are some things that have been completed. There are plenty of enhancements regarding ICWA that haven't, of course, as well. So multiple pertaining to general reports, requests for new or changes to general reports, ICWA related fields, so the new fields as of 2019, and potential data cleanup additions. So there are enhancement requests pending for those things. Multiple are pertaining to ICWA MIFPA genogram documents as well, to improvements, changes, additions, those types of things. So those are out there as well as ICWA active efforts and activities. So when I say ICWA active efforts and activities, I think the enhancement for that one is somehow link ICWA active efforts screens directly to activities. So, you know, something like a checkbox or something that says this is an active effort. So rather than having to rewrite things or copy paste things from notes into the active effort screen. So those things are out there and pending still. So those are in the works. You know, we still are always hoping for, you know, some increased staff resources that can go towards some of the prioritized, you know, some of these prioritized ICWA related requests. We definitely have heard loud and clear that agencies want these prioritized. And we're hoping to start putting on a little bit more time towards those. I know as the SME is the subject matter experts in business ops, along with Summer Day, we recently started making some time specific to these enhancements and looking at these to see if we can't move some things along in the coming year maybe. So hopefully we can start seeing some of those. But that said, a lot of those are from like initially when all the new fields were added to SSIS back in 2019. So a lot of those enhancements came, you know, I would say within the next year after that. People have been using this for a while. You might have some new ideas, some new things that you're thinking, you know what, if they did it this way, this would make a lot more sense, or a change like this would be more helpful, that you might not have thought about before. So please, we're always looking for SSIS mentors and coordinators to continue to submit those SSIS enhancement requests to the help desk. You know, there might be something that we just haven't thought about that would be helpful in keeping track of these and using them. So anything else, anything I missed?
No, there's nothing else that you missed. You've got it covered. One thing that there's some questions in chat that keep coming up in chat. If I could have everybody please use the Q&A feature. I realize that you might not be able to see the Q&A and you can only see chat. However, you know, it is something that we're going to go over all of the chat, or excuse me, Q&A questions. And if your question gets missed because it's in chat, I'd really hate for that to happen. So if you have a sec to just go ahead and transfer your question. I think one of one of the DHS staff members is trying to get them all over to the Q&A, but just a friendly FYI, that way we can track them. And then once we have the all of the questions in the Q&A portion, that's where we'll go ahead and ask the questions from. So the last slide that we have here is our resource slide. And as I mentioned, the first one you see is the new ICWA MIFPA manual. It was just released last month. And it was created by Cindy Miller. She worked extremely hard on getting this manual put out. So please go and take some time to take a look at the manual. And then we have our SSIS ICWA MIFPA data entry. This is found on the SSIS resource page. And then the caseworker checklist, how you can find the designated tribal agents for service of notice using the federal registrars. And then we have our ICWA MIFPA family brochure, which was also created by one of our American Indian Wellbeing Unit staff members. And it's an informational brochure for families regarding ICWA MIFPA, so they know what their rights are. And then the last two is the BIA, a link to the BIA regarding ICWA and our county agency responsibilities under tribal court jurisdiction. There are several additional resources that you can find on the SSIS resource page, as well as the Minnesota Child Welfare Training Academy. I do want to address one question that I saw really quick in chat, because we always provide the information to we always like to provide the information about Laura Newton with the Minneapolis American Indian Center. She is an advocate or in ICWA. She works in their child welfare section of the Minneapolis American Indian Center. And she also has, I don't know if it's a contract basically between, Cindy, you can help me if you know what her role is, but
yeah, she's a liaison.
There we go.
She and a couple of others are liaisons between the tribes and counties, and helping to get like qualified expert witnesses. And you know, if you're having trouble getting a hold of a particular tribe, these folks will be able to help.
Thank you. Yeah. I'll put her number, her phone number, her contact information in chat, along with the Minneapolis American Indian Center link. And in that link, you'll be able to scroll down into the body of the page and see the additional staff members that work with her. And you'll be able to save that contact information. All right, so thank you so much for allowing us to present today. We're gonna go right into our Q&A portion. So one of the panel will be asking these questions. I think we'll start with the very first one that was brought in by Christy. So her question is, go ahead. Did someone unmute? No? Okay, sorry. I thought I heard someone unmute. And then what is, I just want to do a time check. Okay, it's 10:12. Okay, perfect. What is the proper way to document in the ICWA eligibility and or determinations tab when the agency has given MIFPA notice to the BIA? Cindy, do you want to take that one?
I'm not seeing the question. Why don't you go?
Okay, I can do it. I can
okay.
do it. Yep. So if you've submitted a copy of the MIFPA notice to the BIA, there's actually not a spot in SSIS that's specific to sending a notice to BIA. So what you would want to do is just document in your chronology that you sent the MIFPA notice, the copy of the MIFPA notice to the BIA.
But the MIFPA notice can be downloaded, right, and found in SSIS. That's
Yeah.
somewhere, yeah, as a document, because that's where we generally look when we're doing our reviews, to see that it's been filled out and sent.
So I just got a question in chat about the resources. So those that have access to the PowerPoint, are you unable to click the links in the PowerPoint? If you can provide a response in chat.
I know I find, just somebody, this is Marcia, I know I find if you put your PowerPoint, when you like download that, if you put that in presentation mode, then you can click on it. Otherwise the links don't work. So that's how I did it too.
But if they have a copy of the PowerPoint, why wouldn't they be able to click the links?
Yeah, I don't know. I know that when I tried it this morning, it was the same way. I had to put it in presentation mode and then I could click the links. So maybe try that.
Okay, so she's saying put it in presentation. Oh, it was sent in PDF. That's why. Okay. All right. Then what I'll do is I will put all of the links in chat. And then what we can do is, Heidi, if you wouldn't mind copying all the links that are there. And I have some additional ones that I wanted to add there too, but some people can click the links, others can't. But I think what we'll do is, Heidi, if you don't mind, can we just send a resource page to all the participants? Is that possible?
Yeah, I think we can do that.
Okay, perfect.
Sorry, yes, summer day we can. That's not a
Okay.
problem at all. We can
Okay.
send that out following the session if that works for everybody.
Okay, perfect. Oops. Oh. All right, so the second question that we have, is there a minimum age for inquiry for the child? I think Cindy, is there a minimum age for inquiry when you're inquiring with the child?
No, it's really based on the maturity level, I guess, of the child, and it's somewhat subjective because you might have a 6-year-old that understands what you're saying and can answer the question, and others may not. So if you do ask the question of a child, oftentimes we'll see something like child is non-responsive or does not understand. Whereas if you ask a 10-year-old, you know, they might know the answer, maybe not. But it's really kind of a judgment call on the person asking the question if they think the child is able to understand.
So what I'm going to do is also list that they can document their actions. So there's no minimum age, but based on maturity level of child. And then the next question we have, sometimes we're not able to ask parents, child, extended family about ICWA on the same day. Do you propose that we do several different client contacts for ICWA inquiry to document the info gathered from the different sources we are documenting in one activity of all contact we had about inquiry? No, we're not asking that you do several different. We're asking that once you have the information from each of them, well, let me ask this of our SSIS BizOps team. From my understanding, they can go in and update a client contact. Is that true?
Correct. What I was going to say is I think what, we should be contacting, or we should be documenting any contact we have with family anyways regarding the case. So if you're contacting the family regarding, inquiry or whatever else it may be about the case, we should be documenting that in a contact activity anyways. So it would be, a separate contact activity documenting that phone conversation or that meeting with ICWA inquiry in the purpose line, even though it may not be the sole purpose. If you did inquiry in that contact with that family member, just make sure to put in the purpose line that it was an ICWA inquiry.
And I would just add to that. So if those contacts were on the same day, you could put one note for those contacts. The key is if you're talking separate days that you're making these different contacts, well, when you do a contact, you're indicating what day the contact was made or attempted, right? So then they would be separate activity contacts, right, that are being entered. So they may be on, if they're on the same day, you could put them all together and just make sure that you're documenting accordingly within the note. But if they're on separate days, yeah, you're going to need separate notes.
Perfect. Thank you both. Oh, no, I lost the questions. Okay. So we have another question that came in. If a tribe states they don't want phone calls and or emails or faxes and only want to be notified by certified mail, are we allowed to only notify a tribe by certified mail per MIFPA notice? So we've received this question quite a bit because some tribes have been asking to receive the MIFPA notice by certified mail. But we did reach out to those specific tribes because we thought maybe there was some confusion between the MIFPA and the ICWA notice and what the actual requirements are. So it is up to the agency's discretion. Or I'll bring in Cindy too. Do you want to help provide a response to this? From what I remember, it's up to the agency's discretion if they actually want to send a certified a MIFPA notice by certified mail.
Yeah, I mean, that's true because statutorily, you know, the MIFPA notice only needs to go out by email or fax and phone. I guess it would be up to the agency if they want to send that out certified mail. But again, remember that the tribe is not required to respond to a MIFPA notice. It's got to be sent and documented, but they're not required to respond. So I think it would be up to the agency as to whether they want to go ahead with the certified mail for a MIFPA notice. I believe most of the tribes are on notice that the MIFPA notices do not have to be sent out certified mail.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Sometimes we actually receive questions from agencies about out-of-state tribes as well, where out-of-state tribes are asking, what is this MIFPA notice? And as you know, MIFPA is a Minnesota state statute. So the out-of-state tribes are kind of not understanding why they're receiving a MIFPA notice. So what you want to do in those situations is just make sure that you document your conversation or the contact with the out-of-state tribe and just explain to them, I'm sorry, some people are saying that this out-of-state tribes are saying we don't want this notice, but just share with them that it's a Minnesota state. It's in the statute, it's a requirement, you have to send it out, and you can just document the interaction in your contact and or activities. But most, all Minnesota tribes know that the MIFPA notice is first with a phone call and then followed by email and or fax. So Christy, if you want to send a private message to either myself or Cindy and let us know the name of the tribe, if it's a Minnesota tribe, so we can reach out and make sure that there's a just so we can reach out. Next question, and keep in mind, if we don't get to all of the questions, like I said, we'll be putting it in an FAQ and providing the responses, but we're going to try and get through as many as we can. So I apologize if we don't. I don't know if there's an option to extend the time we have, so we can. I'll leave that up to our host. But I remember, I got to be respectful of your guys' time too. I don't know how long we're scheduled. I believe until 11 or 10:30. I can't remember. Heidi?
Summer day, we are scheduled until 10:30. However, if more time is needed and people would like to stay on longer, you do have the option to do so. So just go ahead and do whatever you feel is best.
Okay, perfect. So next question, if we're doing an FA, family assessment, and the family states they are Native American, but do not know the tribe, we were directed by ICWA DHS staff to send an ICWA notice, not a MIFPA notice, to the BIA requesting assistance via certified mail. That is correct. At the end of the FA, do we send a closing letter to the BIA as well? And if we do not hear back from the BIA, do we do active efforts tabs? If so, what do we put in active effort screens for tribal contacts? All right, so the first portion, I think I'm going to break this down or break this up. If we are doing an family assessment and the family states they're native but do not know the tribe, the direction you received from the American Indian Wellbeing Unit at DHS was to send the ICWA notice to the BIA, because the ICWA notice on the second page has that option to request additional information. So that is correct. You want to be sending that to the BIA if you're requesting assistance through certified mail. So the second portion of your question is, at the end of the family assessment, do we send a closing letter to the BIA as well? The answer to that question is no. Correct, Cindy?
No, that's true. You're right.
Okay. So you wouldn't need to send a closing letter to the BIA. And then the other portion, actually, I think I'm going to do this. This might be helpful for everybody to see as well. Sorry, I should have thought of this when we first started. I apologize. So the next portion of the question is, if we do not hear back from the BIA, do we complete active efforts tabs? So for a family assessment, if the family has been receiving services for 30 days or more, then you would complete the active efforts tabs regardless. So you would complete them, like I said, if there's 30 days or more of services. And if so, what do we put in the active effort screens for tribal contacts? I think I need some additional information about that portion. Because are you saying that you didn't, oh, okay. You're saying that you couldn't contact the tribe because you didn't know which tribe you were supposed to contact. And if the BIA did not respond with the information about a specific tribe for this family, then what are you listing for tribal contacts in active efforts? I'm following now. Well, that's a tough one, because so in these situations when families don't really know what tribe, you know, they're from, but they feel like they have some type of family or tribal lineage, a couple of additional questions you can ask the family to try and, you know, get additional information about their history is to potentially ask, you know, who in the family is the one who keeps your history, or who would you guys go to if you had questions? Where did you guys grow up? You know, or where did your relatives grow up, your grandparents, your parents? Was it in northern Minnesota? Was it in a different state? Because then you could send a MIFPA notice or reach out to those other states that have federally recognized tribes, and potentially ask them if the family, if there's any tribal or documented lineage for the families in those tribes. What are your thoughts, Cindy? I understand the question. I understand what she means, or what Heidi means by what do we do when we're putting in the active effort screens if we didn't have any tribal contact.
Mm-hmm.
So if it was under the 30 days, then active efforts wouldn't be required. So there wouldn't be anything you would need to put in there. If it was beyond the 30 days, I think if it's okay with you, Heidi, I think if Cindy, if you don't, it's, you know, if you're unsure as well, I think I would like to table this one and provide some additional information to the group after we kind of think about this for a little while.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay, perfect. I'm sorry, Heidi. I hope that you can allow us just some additional time to really vet this question, especially because of I think for me too, if you can just send a quick message or a private message and let me know if this case was something that was beyond the 30 days. Because like I mentioned, if it's not, then you have the active efforts aren't required if it's under the 30 days. But we're going to go ahead and move on to the next question. What is best practice if we do a thorough inquiry, but we do not know of Native ancestry until after the admit deny has passed? Like if we are able to contact a new family member with new information after the admit deny has taken place. So you're saying that what they're saying is that they, after admit deny has passed, it hasn't been considered an ICWA case. And now you had an opportunity to, as you're building this relationship with the family, you met with additional extended family, and the extended family says, hey, actually there is Indian heritage. So at that point, that's when you would, through inquiry, as I mentioned earlier, inquiry, does extend through the life of the case, and so this is an opportunity for them to start completing, to do the inquiry tab and select or answer the questions, add in the new information, and then you would start by sending out a MIFPA notice to any of the known tribes through first by that phone call within the first 24 hours, and then follow up that by email and or fax. Cindy?
Yeah, I would agree with that. If you have any, if you have reason to know that a person, a parent may be Native American, you're supposed to treat it like an ICWA case until you find out otherwise. Sometimes you don't know at all. If you find out a month in and you've already, sent out notices and had it admit deny, then at that point, you should send out your ICWA notices and then proceed, because sometimes you just don't know. And this starts from the time that you find out. So if the father, like say for instance, the father isn't involved and 2 months later you find out that the father may be Native American or is a member of a Native American tribe. That's why inquiry is so important to do as soon as possible. But if you do find it out at that time, then you send out your ICWA notice to that parent and to the tribe, and you proceed.
Thank you, Cindy. Okay, so next question. Great questions, everybody. Does MIFPA apply to children's work groups that are open for min choice assessments or for waiver case management? MIFPA, that's meaning do you have to send out a MIFPA notice for the min choice assessment? The answer to that is no. I kind of want to go back to the slide that shows when, oops, here it is. I'm sorry. The reason why I put a dash through the word services is because Marcia caught my error in the PowerPoint. It should have said min choice assessments. MIFPA does not apply to the min choice assessments. The other portion of your question, I apologize, was a waiver, I think, for waiver case management. That one I need some help with.
Yeah, I looked it up summer day before we did this because I had a feeling that would come up. So my understanding is no, that it doesn't apply for the waivers, but that gets a little confusing sometimes with the DD, particularly because you can be DD case management and DD waiver. But the key is if it's DD case management, yes, ICWA applies. Does that sound right? Anybody have other
for
information?
DD, CADI, and TBI waivers, ICWA and MIFPA do not, or wait, excuse me, CADI and TBI waivers, ICWA and MIFPA do not apply. For DD case management, when there's no foster care placement, then the MIFPA notice applies along with other requirements such as active efforts.
Yeah,
But
so the key is if it's DD case management, yes, regardless of if there's a waiver or not for DD.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then if the child is receiving, like you said, DD case management services and is in foster care, then both ICWA and MIFPA notices and other provisions apply, requirements apply.
Yeah.
All right, where was that? Phone calls. There it is. Okay. Oh, okay. Cindy's working on the next one. If a worker already enters this into an activity they would just need to copy and paste it into the active efforts tab, correct? As long as what they listed in the activity, contact or activity meets the active efforts documentation requirements. You know, so if they listed as an activity that they provided case management, that wouldn't describe or as long as it has that requires that detailed description of the agency's actions plus the date. So if the contact or activity has detailed information about the agency's actions, then yeah, you could copy and paste that in there. But what we're wanting to make sure people aren't doing with the copy and paste is that they're not copying what they did in Q1 into Q2, Q3, and so on. Okay, next question. When there is an assigned social worker with the tribe and an assigned social worker with the county agency, who is required to complete the ICWA SSIS data, active efforts, etc.? This would be the county agency. The county agency, ICWA does not apply to, ICWA MIFPA does not apply to the tribes. It only applies to the county agencies. So they are the ones required to complete the ICWA tabs and complete all the SSIS ICWA data entry. So can we copy, oh, sorry, next question. So can we copy and paste from our case notes into the active efforts? So go ahead, someone unmuted. If you're, if the statement, if you're responding to the question in the active efforts, and I'm gonna share my screen again. If what you're copying and pasting from your case note or your contact or activity describes with the required descriptions, the agencies or the workers' active effort, and it's not just a single provided case management or set up an out-of-home placement plan. You know, the requirement for active efforts is to make sure that you're documenting how you engaged, how you consulted, how you provided the efforts to invite the tribe and involve the tribal representatives to get involved with the family visits, any of those case plannings or the additional provisions of services. So it's really important that the difference between a case note and an active effort is a lot of times just those quick blanket statements, provide a case management. And maybe, I mean, I'm not saying that that's the same for all agencies, but I think it's really important that what we're trying to get workers to understand is that it has to really describe the agency, the worker and or agency's efforts. So if your case note does not describe that and it needs that additional information, then you can copy and paste some of that information and add to it if that's what you want to do. But you don't want to just copy and paste those, you know, quick statements, because that doesn't meet active efforts requirements. I hope that helps to answer the question. I mean, we really don't want to see copy and paste, but we understand that there's the feeling of duplication here, but you know, regardless of the feeling of duplication, it's really important that we think about the ICWA tabs and the ICWA MIFPA provisions as part of our work. And so we're really wanting people to change the idea of thinking of it as extra and more so as part of your job, you know, part of your daily, you know, responsibilities, depending on which cases that you have. And instead of thinking of ICWA MIFPA and SSIS data entry as extra work, because, you know, there's a different feeling behind it being extra versus already a requirement of, your daily work. So yes and no, you can copy and paste, but it, like I said, it has to meet the active effort requirement. I hope that helps. All right, let's go ahead. Okay, next question. Do we do a new active effort screen if we are doing an FA/FI 3 days into a quarter? If so, typically no additional active efforts are being provided in those last few days. That would be different than the previous quarter. That makes sense. So there's SSIS doesn't allow for there to be, and maybe I can ask Marcia or Erica to chime in here. But you can only have one quarter open at a time, I believe, or pending or in draft status, I believe, and then the other has to be finalized. I know I get confused with this sometimes, so I'm just being transparent, but there is a job aid about, the error messages that you could potentially see in SSIS regarding active efforts. But Marcia?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think you can actually, I think you can have 2 quarters, if I recall right, in draft, but you can't have any more than that. So,
Okay.
so I think that's kind of the issue that people run into is
Okay.
they already have 2, they haven't finalized the old ones. So making sure that those are finalized so you can keep moving forward is a good idea.
Okay. So what I'd like to do then is, it is 10:39. I've seen that we've actually gone down, by about 50 or 60 participants. I'm going to go ahead and keep going, and just kind of check in every once in a while to see which ones have fallen off. But I really want to be respectful of people's time, and if at 10:45, if we've lost a few more participants, thank you to those that were able to stay a little bit longer. I apologize, we didn't get to more of the questions. I will continue to ask until 10:45 and respond. And then what I'll do is we'll provide the remaining questions. We'll provide all of the questions in a Q&A follow-up document. We've already been keeping track of those as they've been coming in. So we appreciate all of your questions. We appreciate that you guys have spent your morning with us. And if you can give us, it'll probably takes a few days to a week to get all of the questions compiled and make sure that there's a response and all of the answers are approved before it gets sent out. There's a process at DHS, as you know. So we'll get to those as well and get that sent out to everybody as soon as possible. So the additional thing we'll do is add in the resources, so folks have those resources as well. When you get the resources, please save a lot of them as a favorite. And remember, there is that family brochure, that ICWA MIFPA family brochure, so that families are understanding what ICWA MIFPA is and what their responsibilities and rights are. All right, so as far as the active efforts question, Heidi, what I'll do is, in the resource page, we're going to put the job aid for the active efforts so that you can see the error messages that could potentially come up. And as Marcia said, if you can have 2 in draft status open, it provides that information as well. Next question. Often parents will say that there is Native heritage, but they're unable to identify a tribe. The worker tries to help narrow down which tribes to send notice to. When workers are notifying potential tribes of voluntary services, the worker doesn't receive a response from tribes after they have called and sent the MIFPA notice. How many attempts should be made? What is the frequency? And what is the best way to handle these situations? That's a great question. And it looks like we might have lost Cindy. So what I'm going to do for this one, Shannon, I believe if you've documented, I'm going to table this one as well, Shannon. The reason why is solely because I want to connect with policy, and it looks like we've lost Cindy for the morning. She might have had a prior engagement that only allowed her to stay until 10:30, but the question about how many attempts, the frequency, and what is the best way to handle this situation. There is a scenario, or excuse me, information about this in the ICWA MIFPA manual. But I still will provide a response to your question. I believe it's 3 attempts. And then you just document in your client case, or excuse me, your contact or activities. But like I said, I just want to confirm that with the policy, ICWA MIFPA policy compliance consultants. So Cindy is one. Another one at the American Indian Wellbeing Unit is Richie or Richard Smith, and then Carrie Owen. So I'm just going to connect with them, but I'm 95% sure it's 3, and you just want to document your efforts. All right, we're going to go ahead and answer this last question. What work group type would you recommend for someone that's opening child PCA services? Is that a CW, child welfare?
PCA, so that was the same one that we talked about on that screen, similar to Min Choices. So using the adult services program type.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that.
No,
great.
that's good.
Okay, so it is 10:44. I think we're gonna go ahead and end for now. Thank you all so much for staying the extra time with us. As I mentioned, we'll get all of these questions out. Just gotta bear with us to compile them. I would say within the week, we can get all of it out. If anybody has any follow-up questions about any of the responses that you get with the Q&A, I would like for you to either send to the SSIS BizOps, and we'll provide that email to you, email address, which is actually down here at the bottom, or you can send it to the ICWA, American Indian Wellbeing Unit, if you have those questions or if you need clarification. Actually, let me ask Cynthia, would you recommend that they send to SSIS BizOps first or the American Indian Wellbeing Unit?
I think Summer Day. I think that it is, if you're unsure of if your question is a mix of SSIS as well as American Indian policy question, I would say please go ahead and send it into the help desk. It's actually probably the fastest way. Shauna, Stacy, and Sam are really a well-oiled machine and are very quick at getting things to where they need to go and assessing where those things need to be. So I think that that's probably the fastest way for folks to get a response. So feel free, like always, feel free to send anything in there, and we will always do our best to get it expeditiously to wherever it needs to be as quick as possible. And so, yeah, feel free to send it in right to the help desk. And if it needs to go to policy, we will get it to policy as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Cynthia. All right. I think that's everything. Thank you again for spending the morning with us. And I really had a pleasure providing the information that we set up for you guys today. And like I said, we'll get these resources and questions out to you as soon as possible. Hopefully within the week here. You all have a great rest of your day.